Well, if anyone can get out of a jam, it's Rupert Murdoch, but this is a pretty big one. Claire Enders from Enders Analysis is an independent media analyst who's been keeping a close eye on events at News Corporation. She joins me now from our London studio. Claire Enders, thanks very much for joining Lateline Business.
Thank you so much for asking me.
Well, Rupert Murdoch's flown into the UK to take control of this crisis. How much of a crisis is it for him?
This is a historic crisis. The extent of the damage done to the political standing of Rupert Murdoch and the standing of James Murdoch and other executives has been immense. The Prime Minister on Friday was essentially declaring war on Rupert Murdoch and on the practices of his newspapers. And that had followed an extraordinary week where Ed Miliband had basically taken charge of the issue following the sort of unraveling of the story around Millie Dowler's phone being hacked while the poor girl was dead. So the scale of the damage done is seeing actually enormous political ramifications for the Murdochs. I mean, as you rightly say, the B Sky B bid, which was so important to the future of News Corp and so important to the future of the family, has now been given a completely new regulatory process running for, say, another 6 to 9 months. Ofcom has opened a fit and proper person investigation into News Corp as a corporate entity and will take advice from the parliamentary inquiry which the Prime Minister announced and the further police investigations that are now going on, in particular into payments to the police and so on. So the scale of the crisis engulfing the organisation's UK interests is extraordinary, and we have seen a British Spring. I mean, the New York Times used that phrase for what had happened after 30 years of building of a network of influence and policy interventions, and obviously, you know, for so long people thought that Rupert Murdoch and News Corp were in effect the puppet master of British life, despite the fact that Rupert Murdoch is actually not British.
Well, he closed the News of the World. The Sun and Sunday Times have been involved in similar practices, according to the reports. Is he going to close those two newspapers as well, do you think?
No, I think that's very unlikely. I mean, actually, to be honest with you, I mean, the decision to close the News of the World was really a business decision because that had become a toxic brand that was being fled by advertisers. It had really nothing to do, I don't think it addresses any of the issues of the crisis. It really doesn't. And those issues are really still out there. The politicians have repeatedly called for Rebekah Brooks's resignation to be accepted. People are asking questions about what James Murdoch knew, when. It turns out that he's only recently been made aware of the allegations of phone hacking, which, since they date back 5-6 years, is simply extraordinary. It just shows a lack of regard for what's going on around. And, and obviously he's been very protected.
So could I ask you, I mean, do you think Rebekah Brooke and James Murdoch, the two senior executives in News International, will survive? Or more to the point, will investors put up with the status quo?
Well, obviously, we're seeing moves. These are matters for the boards of the relevant companies. I mean, News Corp has a board. B Sky B has a board. Obviously, these are just allegations at this stage. But obviously, the issues around why more questions weren't asked, why there wasn't more effort to bring this evidence to the surface. I mean, the Sunday Times, which is somewhat portrayed as the voice of News International, is saying that a dossier had been compiled, but it was lost and nobody had looked at it, and that was in 2007. I mean, it just doesn't, you know, unfortunately, or for whatever's happened has happened. But essentially, you know, what the government is saying in referring the B Sky B bid is we don't trust what the Murdochs say about these matters. We can't trust their undertaking. So we'd like the Competition Commission to review that. And separately, we'd like Ofcom to review whether the corporate behavior or the behavior of News Corp, which is actions and omissions. So it's not just, you know, these rogue reporters. It's what steps the managers might have wished to take to inquire further. Those sorts of matters. Obviously, these are all allegations at this stage, but Ofcom will seek advice where it wishes to. So eventually, the boards of those companies, News Corp and BSkyB, may well have to consider what further, whether it is absolutely appropriate for these executives who were in charge over the last 4 or 5 years, and indeed further back in the case of Rebekah Brooks, whether there's not an issue of responsibility. I mean, the word responsibility has been reiterated by the Prime Minister, by the Leader of the Opposition, by every politician who has spoken on this matter. Who was responsible? Who has to take responsibility? It's not an admission of guilt. It's an admission of responsibility. And so far, James Murdoch followed up his statement on Thursday, which admitted a number of irregularities and mistakes. He followed that up by giving unqualified support to Rebekah Brooks in every TV interview, in the pooled TV interview he did, unqualified support. And Rupert Murdoch has followed that up every day. On Sunday, he said, she's my top priority, and that's difficult. People don't get what they get.
Okay, Claire, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Claire Enders, thanks very much for your time.